Good to go.
All right, we're all good to go. Cool. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our second roundtable through the R2P National Student Board. I think the first one went pretty well. If you weren't able to join us, the kind of basis for this is to bring on a couple of docs on a certain topic and kind of let them chat it out. Let our students have the opportunity to kind of pick their brains, ask questions. So you're going to get as much out of this as you put into it in terms of asking the questions. Sebastian and Dawne, they're both a wealth of knowledge. I've been fortunate enough to intern with them over the last 6-7 months. So they have a lot of great tips, not even just on the business side, even clinical side, and just everything in between that, really. So without further ado, I'll introduce Dr. Sebastian Gonzalez. He's a founder, CEO, Kingmaster.
You know, it's funny you say that. I was just playing baseball earlier, and so one of the guys is like, so you're like the CEO? I'm like, well, anyone can be a CEO if you pay $800 to the state. So
yeah. So he started performing plays about, 12 years ago now, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Am I right on my timing? Yep. And then Dawne joined on the team about a year ago. Both of them are graduates of SEU or LACC for the different chiropractic schools. Very similar to a lot of the things we cover. Things they do in their practice is very rehab based, R2P based, everything you guys learn, everything from neurodynamics to DNS to MDT. They incorporated it all. So if you're curious on how you can apply that into your format or start it in practice, if you're not getting the right information from your schools or the model of the Rackham and Crackham isn't aligning with you, which I don't think it does for most of you if you're an R2P, they have plenty of tips and advice to help you out with that. So without further ado, Dr. Gonzalez, if you want to introduce yourself other than what I just said, anything I missed?
Yeah, I'm Sebastian. I graduated from LACC in 2009, I think. So I started my own business right after school. I'm sure a lot of you are at PPRs already, probably. So I left PPR. Actually, so I was at my PPR. I asked him, "Hey, can I rent a room here?" And so I rented a room. We actually did like a trade of services since as an intern, I was pretty valuable because I knew his workflow pretty good. And so we kind of, for at least 3 months, we kind of traded hours for rent. And so it made it so my overhead was pretty low for the first 3 months while I'm gathering clients. After that, I was busy enough where I could tell him I don't want to work there anymore. And so we parted ways, and I eventually found places with lower rent. I rented from my dad, actually. I rented out of a dental office for about 3 years. Patients, it's funny, they didn't really care, and then we finally got the big place that we were at before. We had some leasing issues. We got moved to the same building, but different office. And now we just moved to this office that we're at now in October last year. So I'm sure you guys are going to have leasing journeys, and that's mine. It's really common, but I would keep overhead low in the beginning if you can. Dawne, who will be in here soon, she's on a call with a prospective new patient. We kind of have a general rule. If someone's trying to book, you get the hot money. It's hot money. Get the hot money, right? So we could say, hey, we're doing this call, but really, like, that's business, right? And this is a business call, right? So she was an intern she graduated in 2019, December. So she was a group of about 4 interns that I had. She did a really good job. I asked her what her plans were after school, and she wasn't quite sure. And so I told her if she wanted to stay around, that we can try to do this and build this. But I think as you're all going to find out, it's not easy to find clients. And if you're not going to do a Rackham and Crackham, and I guess your wellness model, as you say, you don't have a lot of patient retention either. So you're always looking for new people, right? So she's been around. We've been able to fill her schedule to at least some degree. We're still struggling with that a little bit, but I think it's going to work out pretty well. So I'm sure that you probably have all kind of found as you've gone through your PPRs, or if you haven't already, is that it's hard. You don't find a lot of people who practice the way that you want to practice who have a lot of employees. Here's Dawne.
Hello.
So it's an adventure, and you have to kind of figure out how to make it work. I introduced you.
You were doing great. I heard you.
Did you get the patient on the schedule?
I did.
See, she closed a patient. So that's the most important thing. You would not make this call if you had to close. If that took 30 minutes, you'd probably still be on the phone, right?
Yeah, honestly, you keep going until you get them to agree to something.
So that's do you want to add anything about you?
I mean, I don't really know what else to add. I love it here. I think it's a great job. I'm excited to share some things with you guys. But I kind of thought maybe it was going to be like a question thing, so I don't really know what you guys are looking for.
They just wanted an intro.
Hi, I'm Dawn.
Great.
Yeah, so I actually, if I were to go a little bit back to school and kind of familiarize you guys with the way I practiced at first, it was a lot of soft tissue and manual adjustment that I did a lot of in school. I find myself going into like the psychosocial approach too in school for some reason. I just attracted those kind of people that needed that. So I thought that that's kind of what I was going to do. And then started interning here and really learned some things that I had never seen ever in school, and started to get some better understanding of how all this rehab stuff works. And you see a lot better progress and a lot quicker. So now I'm here and doing that, and it's been great.
Awesome.
Back
Thanks.
to you, Jared.
Yeah, so just so everyone knows, feel free to like enter any questions you have in the chat. If you prefer to like unmute yourself and speak out loud, if you're showing your videos, just mention that in the chat. But like we kind of mentioned, this is kind of more Q&A format. So if you have dying questions, you know, whatever it is, feel free to start asking away in that chat bar or mention that you want to. And if not, I'll throw out a couple in there. So I guess.
I don't know. I love that we have 3 of our own interns in here.
Right.
If there's any dead time, those people should be asking questions.
Yeah.
Or
So
else I'm gonna ask Amr to do the ring game.
Oh, which one is Amr? I haven't been able to.
I don't know about that. Just kidding.
While we're waiting, I guess, what did you start off with, Seb, before, like when you first started? Were you cash based only? Were you insurance? Did you do a little balance? Kind of what that looked like?
I dabbled with it. I tried to be in network with one insurance. The person that I had worked from, he was funny. He was just solely like ART. He did have some weight training stuff in the office, but he'd see like 35 people a day, 3 days a week, $100 plus a pop, just churning, you know. He'd have some good insurances too, but he kind of had a general rule that like you just do ones that are easy insurances to bill and that they pay you well, you know, they pay you over your cash rate. So I kind of adopted the same thing. I did try to get into Blue Shield. I was into Blue Shield for a year. It was not great. It wasn't bad either, but it's not like the thing where it's like, oh, get on all these lists, they'll send you people. I didn't have that experience. But there was definitely a couple people in the beginning where they were like, they had good policies. They worked at school districts. I billed their insurance and they were like, they paid the bills, you know. It's when you're getting some good insurances that pay like $150 a pop and the person's coming, you know, 4 days a month, that's pretty close to your rent, you know, if you had so I wouldn't throw those people away. Even if you want to be a cash practice, that might help you out in the right start.
Is there any like particular insurances you would recommend us to try to get in network with, or, you know, if we had to kind of pick and choose like the most effective ones for ourselves to starting out?
The VA has a community care program, which is pretty good. So that's in through Tri-West. Those ones, at least in our area, they're paying over $130 a session. And that's probably, as you guys are getting out of school, I know how it is. It's like, oh, should I charge $60? It's like, I mean, they're going to pay double of what you're going to actually charge. So by the way, you should charge a lot more. Donna can probably speak on that topic a little later. But we dabbled with Medicare. We haven't really had a good experience with that yet, right? I mean, it's not like they send you people. And that was mainly because with Medicare, you're not supposed to treat anyone Medicare age unless you are par, non-par or whatever. So we're non-par. We still are. And the longshoremen, at least in our area, are pretty good too. But anthems are sometimes okay as a general rule. Like if someone works at a place where there's like 10,000 employees, they're going to have probably a better group policy. If they have their own plumbing business, you might as well not even waste your time calling the insurance policy. Cover California, generally, in my opinion, has been shitty. And like they all kind of have their little wishy-washy things. Like we have Aetna people have come through, like she had an Aetna patient. We build it for them. And then they send us a credit card with no one's name on it, no data service. We have no idea who that's for. So it's like Aetna people is like, we'd love to, even if they paid well, for bookkeeping, we can't do it, right? Unless they give you some type of answer. So we're like, there's a lot of them that we just have people kind of bill on their own. Or if it's a real sticking point, we'll do a courtesy billing for them.
What would you say? Oh, Jared, were you going to ask a follow-up?
No, I was just gonna
Cool.
keep it going. No one had questions.
Yeah, what would you say is like the three biggest challenges trying to run a cash-based business, especially being fairly new? You're now in this for what, 12 years? So it might be easier, but as a new doc, what would be challenges with that model of practice?
So why don't we start with Dawn on that, because that's all she really knows, but I'm sure you have friends who are graduates that are doing cash practices too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or
I think there was a few things that popped in my head. Hope I remember all of them. But the first thing that pops into my head is asking for the money. You go from being a student and you're not allowed to, get paid for what you do if you're just like practicing on people and whatnot. So getting comfortable with even just asking for cash in the first place is pretty hard. Second being that people get really upset if you don't take their insurance. What am I paying for insurance for if it's not going to pay for it? And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I don't take your insurance. So that conversation can get kind of hectic sometimes, and they can actually get a little angry with you every once in a while. So that's a pretty difficult conversation to have sometimes, but you just you keep them calm and you tell them how it works. And, if you care about getting better, we're really good at what we do. So you're going to come in and pay for it if you really want to get better. Second thing being is that people love you. They're like, they see you on social media and they're like, we know that you're the practice for us. They want to come in, but what are your prices? And you tell them your prices and they're like, are you kidding me? Like, I can't afford that. So having another conversation about just like, if it was $50, it might be a different conversation, but we're better than $50. So that's another, I guess that would be my top three. Just what's really hard about
I think if you can kind of take a different way, it's different ways. Like if you've talked to people about insurance yet, because they will, even if they, like, there was a guy who called earlier, he's like, I want to come in, I'm just curious if my insurance covers, right? And so he had said that like he said he paid, I want to say over $1,000 a month for his policy. And so I totally get why he wants to get it covered. But I was like, I agreed with him. I was like, bro, I spend like $350 a month and it's absolute trash. I don't expect to go anywhere except for unless I'm dead on the side of the road and someone swoop me up, put me in the hospital, right? It's a stop loss. And so he would be one where he wants to know because he wants to save a little money, obviously, but also he's not married to the idea. Some people are married to the idea. It is in I don't know how it is in different countries, but in America, healthcare is covered. You go to a trainer, they won't ask if anything else covers it. They won't ask if their massage is covered either. So healthcare, you're covered. I remember we were starting this office here. Someone walked by and they said, "Oh, you're chiropractors. So do you have to pay?" And it's like, yeah, you got to pay. I forget who was here with me. I'm like, well, how do you feel knowing that? I think it was Mikey.
Uh-huh.
How do you feel knowing that you won't, like, no one wants to pay for your services, right? But some people, when they call, they're like if you ask them, like, hey, what's your experience with the insurance? I got Kaiser. It's just crap. Like, agree with them. You're right. It's crap. Here's what we can offer that's different than what you're doing. So some people love their insurance. Some people hate it. You got to play off of what they're talking about. By the way, you probably all spent over $100 at a bar before, right? $100 ain't too cheap to come in for a little care, okay?
Good point.
Yeah.
Looks like there was a question.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I'm driving, so it might be hard to hear me. But I know, like nowadays, most of your marketing is like YouTube and like Google reviews and stuff. What was the steps when you first started out? Like, what was your biggest marketing successes, and then how has that progressed as you come further into your career?
I tried B&I. I didn't love it, mainly because it wasn't my target market. I've tried MD marketing. I've tried cold calling. I've walked into gyms. I've walked into school districts. you know, I joined a running group and I don't love running. I've joined a CrossFit gym. I don't like CrossFit either, right? There's like, you're working out right now at a gym and you set up a workshop, right?
Mhm.
But I mean, no, you said you like the gym and you
Yeah.
like the workout, but you could be spending time doing something else, right?
Yeah.
She spent a lot of time doing the marketing, right, currently, of what's working and what's not. So this is probably a better current versus what didn't work. Let's maybe talk about what's working.
Yeah, well, if we're going to be honest, like what's our best marketing tool here is what Seb does with YouTube. So that's the thing that brings the most people in. That's most of our calls, those most of our new patients. So that's the number one for us. But if I don't have patients, I'm spending my time. I tried the MD thing. It's uncomfortable and it's really hard. It's pretty unfortunate that medical doctors don't want to give you the time of day for you to just tell them like what you have to offer. So still trying to figure that out, but it was honestly one of those just like uncomfortable things to get past, and then you kind of learn some stuff from it. But biggest focus right now is getting into gyms because that's our target population, people who are active and just have some low back pain, hip pain, whatever. So, you know, I've done the whole walking in and just trying to sell them type of thing, trying to be something that you're not type of thing. And I'm just figuring out if I just become part of the community there and give it some time and have some patience, people just get to know you and ask what you do and they'll come and see you. Or you just have some coffee with the gym owners or the managers or whatever. And some will give you the time of day, some won't. So I'm still trying to trial that and figure all that out. But
well, you're finding too that like most gyms you go into, if they're bigger gyms, they have a PT or someone who rents from them already, right?
Yeah. So it's a challenge too. Most of the times, a lot of people right now are renting rooms in gyms. So I'm walking in there trying to, you know, here I am, this is what I have to offer. And they're like, oh, there's somebody who already rents a room here doing that. And you're just like, all right, well, on to the next. Or you can stay there and try to figure out how to differentiate yourself from the person who's there. That's something that you can always do too.
Can I ask a piggyback on that question? So you say, like, since YouTube is your most successful way of marketing, like, what are the do's and don'ts you like figured out over the years with that? Like, how do you have to post a certain amount? Do you not post certain amounts of things that are like, oh, this is only for like actual patients? Like, you don't want to give away all your gold, or do you find that you can post little bits here and there? And what the success that you have in person is like the correct pattern of all those. Does that make sense? What I'm asking.
So you're saying, should we not give away too much? And
Yeah.
Okay.
How often do you post? Like, yeah, kind of the rules of YouTube and social media, I guess.
Well, we're kind of breaking those rules at the moment because, I mean, in the past, I think the kind of the consensus is one time a week. You're like a TV show, same time, same day, thing like that, right? Years ago, I kind of realized that like 1 out of every 30 videos that I post, all of a sudden it just catches fire at some point in time. It's unlike an Instagram post where you do it, no one watches it, and it dies. Like YouTube is like a year later, you're like, oh my God, like we're getting 2,000 views a day on this stupid thing, right? And it's not even the video you pick, it's some other one, you know, on like de Quervain syndrome. And you're like, God, now we're getting de Quervain's calls, right? Like we have one, I think that's on like testicular something. And it's like, God, I want these testicular calls, right? So I just want a low back one. So we're doing 3 days a week right now, mainly because last year I kind of circled back into thinking that what's worked in the past for me was YouTube. I'm just going to dominate it. I'm just going to crush it. And we're going to release 3 days a week. And so we do days where we just do about 10, 15 videos or so. We do it sometimes independently, sometimes together. For a general format that you're going to want though, I'd probably do like it's hard to say. You've had one, the shoulder blade one, which is doing well. It's like 2 minutes. People love that video. And then there's another one, which I did from Piriformis, which is like 15 minutes long. So it's hard to choose a correct format too. What was her last question about?
I think you answered all of it.
Did I answer all your
Like,
questions?
you give away like the gold, like, oh, this is gonna really like help them. Like, is that a way on YouTube, or do you kind of save that for your treatment?
So that's a good question. So you all know kind of what you're doing, right? Like you're almost graduated. Have you ever had a pain or an ache that you can't figure out? All of these people that are watching your videos, if they're not medically educated, they don't know what they're doing. And like, I'm not saying that some of them won't have success, and I hope that they do have success, but it's more complicated than just a single magic trick. So I don't think we're giving away too much because we're organizing for them when they come in. Even if we wrote a template program that took them through the first 4 weeks of whatever, they're going to misinterpret, they're going to do poor tension cueing, they're going to do, they might do too many of one exercise versus not another. I'm sure a lot of people have bought McGill's back mechanic book, which is a phenomenal book, but they don't use it right, or they misinterpret and think they can't bend the spine forward anymore. So people make mistakes all along the way. So I wouldn't be afraid that they're going to completely solve their issue on their own, because the fact of the matter is most of the time they won't.
All right, one last question, picking back off that. Like, I know in the office you guys don't do like stretching and stuff, but you'll post videos of stretching. Is it almost more like content, like post more content and like less about like what you're posting?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
You don't want to I think like he brought up the testicular thing earlier. I don't even know we had a video on that, to be honest, but like, you don't want to put anything out there of like things that you want walking in the door and you're not super comfortable with too. I think we try to stay away from that. But there's times where he'll just put a camera in my face and be like, hey, do something about TFL. And I'm just like, okay. And I'm like, you have pain right here, do a side plank. Do I think that that's actually going to help? Could it? Sure, maybe. But people will try it. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, they're going to call us and ask for more help. So I think it's yes and no.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of like people who watch Dr. Phil who, they don't have the problem. They don't use the tips, but they like Dr. Phil and they want to work with Dr. Phil. It's not really about whether they improve themselves or not. It's whether they get familiar with you and comfortable with you. So they're going to come to you because you're the foremost expert and the most knowledgeable person and the most friendly one about this topic, right?
There is a question that popped up on the chat. In your 12 years or so of practice, how have you seen the role of rehab progress in the field of chiropractic?
That's kind of a hard question because I'm sure you all have gotten to the point, I'm sure you all started 2-3 years ago where you didn't know that rehab actually worked because you weren't aware of it. So I did ART for 5-6 years, and then I dabbled into strength training, more of like more weight training. I was skipping all the correctives, So yeah, there was a progression issue for me. So I didn't have the right formula in place. So it wasn't working for me either. But did you have a moment where you thought, oh my God, rehab actually works?
Yeah, it was my first day here. And not necessarily
That's why she's so good on video.
I always used rehab. It was a lot of like what you do in school where it's, you do your manual therapy because that's what you're learning. And then maybe you just spend a couple minutes giving them some Brugers or some chin tucks or whatever else you want to do and go home and see how that works, right? Like you believe in rehab, but you don't spend at least for me, didn't spend a lot of time doing it. And then I started coming here and seeing how well it worked. And I transitioned a little away from let's do a small amount of TLC because I want to use my 15 minutes in clinic doing mostly rehab that you can go home with. And I want to make sure you're doing it correctly because I saw that worked way better.
Yeah. I don't know if the role has really changed. I'm sure I'm sure you're a small percentage of your profession. And so I was too, and we are still now. And so I think there's still a lot of people who are doing, the same stuff they were doing. And so I don't know if the role is really changing, but to be honest with you, I know that the people have kind of, we've had people kind of ask like, well, what about what all these chiropractors are doing when these other PTs are doing? I don't care. I really don't care. Like mind what you're doing. Don't worry about them. Don't worry about the other part of the profession. Just do good work and do what you do. So it's just focusing on other crap that doesn't matter.
I think kind of going off that, then like how, especially within this group, like RTP, everyone here is already pretty like-minded in terms of rehab and incorporating exercise therapy and things like that. It's like, how do you set yourself apart from other practitioners like that, like other PTs or other like-minded rehab professionals? And like, what is it that you guys are kind of doing without, I guess, diving into too much like deep details, because we could probably talk about it for hours, but like, how do you kind of set yourself apart and market yourself as like the go-to place versus like Joe Schmo down the street that's doing T-band burgers and stuff like that.
Well, remember, people are coming in because of YouTube, so they just like us, right? And so we're trying to put on a good show. We're the locally world famous chiropractors. It's now trademarked, so you guys can't steal it. Okay. And that's just what we're doing, right? So anyway, so that's the first part. But like when it actually comes down to technique, I know that we were talking about this with that last gym, right? What did we decide upon for there was the FRC people?
Yeah, I don't remember what you were talking about though. I don't remember what you said.
So Donna has this thing where she just tends to blank out and not listen to me. So I'll tell. So she was right. She was there. We were like, you were even talking about. Anyways, so to differentiate like the technique. So we're going to have this workshop at a gym. And so we're going to meet with the trainers, and the trainers kind of do their warm-up thing, right? Do you remember this now?
Yes.
Okay, so go ahead.
Well, are you talking about first aids is what you're trying to get at?
How to differentiate that? Because the public and the trainers see you as the same.
Mhm.
The question was how are we differentiating ourselves?
Oh, well, I mean, if it's actual with conversation with people and trying to differentiate, what he's talking about is what we have differently is first aids, I think is what we're trying to get at least this is what I'm going to say. First aids is basically what's different. I've never really seen this before. It's like a step-by-step approach though. So you can go into a PT clinic anywhere and they're probably going to do, I mean, there's PT that only does your roller tables, your heat, your E-stem, and that's pretty much it, right? Or you have your people who go straight into making you squat, making you do glute bridges, making you do dead bugs. But like there's this in-between part of like, you may not respond to rehab right away if we still have pain that's stopping you from being able to do it, right? So I think first aids is what sets us apart from most because it's really finding directional preference, ways to empower the patient so that they feel like when they go home and they have pain, they know what to do about it. Instead of relying on us. So that really sets us apart. And so that first aid kind of is what our workshop is going to be at the gym is if you have somebody, a client that you're doing a workout with and they complain of hip pain, try this and see, give them a couple of our first aids that we do here. And if it helps them, great. If not, you know that you should probably send them to us because we can help them sort of thing.
Yeah. You can do the other route too, which we kind of discussed with some MDs don't know any chiropractors. So we're just taking the send them to us type of like approach. Obviously we haven't had a lot of success with MDs because we don't get to talk to them for some reason. They're behind this wall and it's gotten harder with COVID. But it's just like, just refer them. And I don't like, it doesn't really matter what they think they're referring them for, but if the patient says, hey, I want to see a chiropractor, what do you think? They're like, well, I know one, it doesn't really, you don't have to differentiate anything. It doesn't matter. You're just another practitioner, another specialist. Or you can just take I was telling this last gym to just refer garbage can cases. So anyone who doesn't respond to your PT, who I'm sure they're doing a great job, not everyone responds to everybody. So if there's people in the gym who are still suffering and they went through PT and they didn't improve, send them to us. We love garbage can cases. We're really good at complicated cases.
Yeah. I think I interpreted your question at first, Jared, a little bit differently. I think it was Jared, but also the way I was going to kind of answer that was more just like, you'll hear what people go through in PT too. So like school teaches you low back pain, go bird dog, go glute bridges, right? Like you have this almost like cookie cutter approach, or like, here's a paper with some exercises on it, go home and do these. And you have no idea if that's the right exercise for them. We have people come in all the time that you think in your head, like, oh, the way that they're describing this and moving, they're probably going to respond well to this. You do it and they don't respond. So these cookie cutter approaches that a lot of people are getting, you can always differentiate yourself if you're just talking to a potential patient of how it's individualized for them. We're always going to have an outcome measure that we're coming back to see, are you responding to this exercise before I send you home with it and hope that it works? It worked in here, so it's probably going to work if you do a little bit more at home.
Well, I interpret it the other way. So the other thing to consider too, and probably Jared's already experienced this on phone calls, if someone says, well, I've tried massage and I've tried PT and I've tried dead bugs and I've tried blah, 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 right? How are you any different? Well, we do not that stuff. Like just basically take everything that didn't work and say, you're not that. Well, what do you do? Well, what do you think will work? And she's going to play off the person a little bit more versus just focusing on just the thing that you think is the most important, I mean, someone might not care about what Don's first aids are, they would just want to know that you're going to give them the care that might work versus the same old stuff. They don't want a piece of paper. They don't want the same exercises. Why would they come? But how can you say you're different if you don't know what they did already?
Yeah, no, I think you both kind of answered it perfectly of what I was expecting. And I was kind of using that as like my driving motivation. Like I've just heard since being there, the different conversations with people like, hey, like, yeah, like, I've seen XYZ providers, I've done XYZ even exercises, like what do you like, what they're pretty much asking without asking me, like, what am I going to get differently there? And I kind of use that to communicate with them. So, okay, like, what did you do? Like, how did you do it? What have you tried? What worked? We kind of do a little bit differently this way, things like that. So it's kind of tying that in.
There's times too where people respond to a certain first aid and I'm like, man, my corrective after this is actually something they've done with their last PT, but I think that the way I'm going to coach it's going to be different. So we do it anyways, just to see. We're like, let's just try it. And they're like, I definitely did not do it like this. So sometimes you can always just say that you're different in the way that you coach it, high tension, whatever it may be. Yeah,
I think you'll see that the first time you have anyone like you say, have you done a bird dog before? And they're like, yeah. And they do this big swooping, dramatic, picture taking yoga one, and say, that's a good start, but let's add a couple different things. The magic is not the exercise, it's how you do it.
Yeah, definitely. There was another one, if there's nothing else that anyone thought of tying on to that topic there. The question was, did you find that acquiring the first 15 patients was harder than acquiring the next 150? How did you try to get that domino effect working earlier / faster?
I don't know. I really don't know because
I feel like we're still trying.
Yeah. It's, the problem with making people better is that they don't stay around. So, to have an ethical practice and want people to feel better, at some point you have to let them go, or you have some type of exit plan. And we were just talking about this right before we jumped on here, is like when I have this, like you guys, some of you might be already familiar, I'm sure the interns are, that we have here, is the kind of like the 5-step approach. And our wellness care is strength conditioning. And it doesn't have to be really crazy stuff. It doesn't have to be CrossFit. It doesn't have to be strong first. It's just general crap. And just acquiring general physical preparedness. So next time that you're crossing PCH, to go get a beer at the next place, you're not going to sprain an ankle or tear a hamstring, or sorry, I guess people don't really tear their hamstring too much. Let's say you strained it, right? And so just general physical preparedness usually makes people feel better, but you have to get them there because they're in pain and they're probably not thinking about picking up a weight or they just want to. There was a kid that came in here. She was like 14. And I was like, so what is your goal? What do you want out of this? She's like, to get rid of pain. I said, come on, there's a little bit more to it than that. She's like, I want to be able to get off the ground without pain. And so her dad was like, I thought it before he said it, but he's like, isn't that like an old person goal? It's like, yeah. I'm like, what do you want? You want to hike a mountain? Like, what do you want? So they're not really thinking that yet, but as they start to go through their improvement, you got to expose them to some load. And I know there's this whole paradigm shift where just load it. There's a time and place to load it. But I think getting people to general physical preparedness is a really good, it's a really good ethical treatment plan, but also too, that would work on our retention. And so that's something that we've struggled with over the years because, I'm sure you guys have done it too. You do this magical like exercise or treatment and all of a sudden you're like, I'm good. See you later. No, there's more, but maybe they're not to that point yet in their life where they're ready to hear that. So I don't think the 15 and 150 are really something I can really tell you. But if you're talking about YouTube followers, the first 15 are the hardest.
What led you to like pursue like YouTube and the podcast and like all those different outlets for like marketing?
It's easy to do it from in the doors of the office.
Honest answer.
Go out and do the bitch work.
Yeah, we have the interns do the bitch work. I don't know. YouTube is, I look at it like a little army of marketing people that never die and I don't have to pay. So I like that. The podcast, to be honest with you, I've considered stopping it mainly because it's a lot of you people listening to it, which I like you, but you don't pay me money. And it's something that I have to go back to every week. I do enjoy it, but I've gotten a lot of information out of it that I don't think I really need to continue. We've made versions recently where it's like all things knees, all things hamstrings, right? And these are more targeted at, and if you guys are listeners to the podcast, you'll hear that we're talking not to you, we're talking to patients.
Mhm.
And so we've had people call from those podcasts, and we use them partially in drip campaigns too when people sign up for some of our things on our website. It's just indoctrinating them. And that's the only reason the podcast is still going forward. I might change it to every 2 weeks just because I already have the content we need unless we start making more. So, but YouTube pays the bills. Dawn never thought she would do YouTube. Now she just loves it.
It's just not as scary anymore to have a camera in your face is all. But at first it's weird.
I bet. With YouTube, since you're building such a big online presence, and with the pandemic over the past years, we had to lock down for a short time. People couldn't be seen in person. I know you guys adapted and started doing some of the virtual sessions. Would you mind talking a little bit about how that experience was for you? How was trying to adapt to the situation? How was trying to give your style of care virtually? Did that change how you practiced, or does this bring up new obstacles for you? Things like that.
Sure. I think at first when it started happening, we made sure that anybody who was coming in person knew that virtual was an option. And if they're already getting our care, they know that we don't need to put our hands on them to make them feel better. So they were pretty open to it. And then it was using the platforms that we had to let people know. I mean, obviously there's a pandemic going on right now and things are closing down. And if you're afraid to come indoors, you've gotten well off of some of our videos doing these exercises. We can help coach you individually online as well doing that. So that was kind of the first step of just acquiring a virtual platform. It literally happened when I got licensed too. It was in March of last year and I was just great. So my first patient ever licensed was virtual and it was super weird. But it worked out well. So it's just getting it out there and letting people know, because they think chiropractor, how are you going to do that virtually? So they got to know that you can do what you do. That's pretty much what I would add to that.
Yeah, I think it is all, it's not hard to do virtuals. And I think it's more acceptable now to hear that you're going to see your doctor virtually. But, if you're going down, if people are thinking that you are manually having to fix them and crack them and so on, it is hard to, I heard there was a massage therapist that one of our patients had that they were doing virtual massages. It's how do you do that? Just teaching her how to massage herself. And it just, so, but yeah, as long as they understand that we don't need to touch them, it really doesn't change a lot. But yeah.
Yeah. Some of the weird things was calling the boards of all the different states and seeing if we could treat people in different states, because our, YouTube following is all over the place. So that was always something that was taking a lot of time, and the legality of all of it. That was something that was weird too, but yeah.
But yeah, there's Sam Collins has some good website, he did a good one on even billing with telehealth. That I think he probably still has it on his site, HC Ross, which was, I think it was $30. It was worth it because there's different billing codes that you would do. Even the VA allowed for telehealth at that point in time. So yeah. Now Jane, by the way, the EHR, which you all should probably think about getting. They have telehealth on there, and it's everything's pretty solid in there. It just takes a little bit of time to set it up.
Do you think that's going to change your business model in any way going forward?
The virtuals?
Yeah.
Well, it sure gets lonely in here when Donna's 5 virtuals in a day, and it's are we seeing anybody today? It's just odd. I don't know. I would like to see more virtuals personally, because I'd like to diversify, the risk of what if this happens again, Most of my patients are in person. Most of your patients are virtual, right?
Mhm.
So I want to swap that a little bit. I want Dawn to make her sweat on the floor a little bit more. But that's kind of the only difference. I don't think virtuals are going away. And if you don't know how to help someone like without putting your hands on them, I think you're going to suffer and not be able to have those opportunities.
I have a question off of that, if you don't mind, Jared. What did those virtual consults look like from like an initial visit, your follow-ups, what your plan is? Can you talk through that a little bit?
Yeah. So we had to like kind of sit down and figure out like, can we coach people through certain orthopedic exams so we could get information from them? So obviously coaching them through range of motion is pretty easy. But we had to like kind of get creative with, can we test some of their myotomes? Can we do some neural tensioning? Can we load their hip a certain way? So it was a lot of that kind of stuff and figuring that out. So sitting them in a chair and bringing knee to chest and loading into the hips, all that stuff was kind of interesting, but nothing really changes as far as step-by-step approach for treatment. It was still trying to figure out a first aid for them. You can always coach them through some soft tissue stuff if you think that would help, or some stretching. But you just kind of let them know this is what the future of what this looks like going forward. So you always had your pain provoking thing. Tell me what hurts right now, and we'll chase that a little bit and coaching them through stuff. But going forward, it was just like, well, now that we've done all of this, our visits are going to be a little bit shorter. So each time you come in, show me something that hurts. We'll make sure that all the things we're choosing for you are working, and then just coach them through stuff that to continue to improve on it. And creating weights at home too. You had to get people to get some backpacks if they don't have any kettlebells, because like all the weights sold out in the very beginning of COVID. So getting creative with weights is kind of fun too. Most people have resistance bands though, which is interesting.
Yeah, where they have those. They didn't have heavy bands, did they? They had the TheraBands. Yeah, I think the only thing I'll add to that is that there is some legal aspect with telehealth that you guys should be familiar with. Again, the HJ Ross thing is pretty good. That's why I'm suggesting it. And so I forget all the, actually, I won't even bother talking about it here because you guys should just invest in that. I wouldn't be the right person to tell you about it anyways, but
legality of it.
Nah, I'm done with that. There was something else I was going to add.
I don't know.
I was going to say that some of your patients, whether in person or virtual, they might not be familiar that exercises have a timeline. Corrective exercises are intended to correct something, correct it, and then make them progress, and not just progress to more exercises that are just fun on the ground, like more to our load-bearing ones. And so you kind of mentioned that, I might see them weekly, bi-weekly, and just reminding them that these exercises are like a medication. We're trying to get you off of them. And so the progression of that turns into what she's kind of talking about.
That's a good way to put it.
Dusting it out. Don likes to say. I guess this probably should have been like one of the first questions, but like generally, what's like your a typical session in person look like then? Since Corey brought up the virtual, like in person, for these people, for everyone to kind of get an idea of like what is your like rehab progression look like, or pretty much like what does a typical session look like for someone coming in?
Do you want this?
I mean, sure.
I feel like I've talked a lot.
Yeah. Honestly, you're saying that right now, Jared, and it's going to sound very familiar to you because I'm just going to say it the way I say it to a patient, because you always give your patient what to expect going, when they come in or whatever. So there's a step-by-step approach that we follow. Why are you doing that?
Because they have to feel it.
So there's a step-by-step approach. We call it like a 5-step system. First couple of steps are giving you history, examination, diagnosis, right? Second step is finding you the first aid. What is a first aid? You guys, some of you may even have that question, like, what the heck do you mean by first aid? I always explain it to people as like, if you have an infection and they give you antibiotics and you dose it out for a short period of time until you slowly take them away from it, that's the first aid, which is a position or movement in office that can help decrease symptoms as we dose it out. You want to hit the save button on that help by finding a corrective exercise to build strength around the area that we're supporting or that we're trying to focus on. And then going forward from there, we want to take you away from floor exercises and we more want to put some weight in your hands and give you the basics of strength and conditioning so you can go out there and, return to play is the last step. So go back out there and do whatever sport or whatever type of thing you're trying to do with your life. And that's when you ask them about their goals. But that's pretty much what to expect.
Yeah.
Short way to say it.
So usually on day one, then we'll focus on like mainly 3 things. Like we'll try to itemize, like I usually won't go into all that, the long-winded thing, what people on day one, because they're like, dude, I'm just in pain. I just want to. And so we've kind of created this like 3 goal thing, right? I think it's working okay. Whenever I made it up and then I told Dawne to do it, and she's like, that's really working. I'm like, shit, I better start using it then.
That's honestly how our relationship works. Seb has the great ideas. I'm the one who implements them. And then he ends up being like, teach me how to do it. And I'm like, you're the one who taught me.
I got to shadow you because something's really working over there. So we've been kind of saying there's mainly 3 goals today. Number 1 is finding a diagnosis and a complementary first aid. And I'll explain these as we go through. The second thing is figuring out what you're doing possibly in your life to create this problem, because a lot of problems go away on their own, but yours isn't. The third thing is maybe a supplement or exercise, and that's really optional because you might not get to that today. So diagnosis, obviously, you all know what that is. First aid, I call it like, if you have a sunburn, maybe we just take you out of the sun, right? And it'll heal on its own. If you have back pain, you might not know what movements are creating your problem. And so what do you think is creating your problem? They're like, oh, it really hurts when I sit. Okay, so maybe we get you walking a little bit more then. Maybe we get you a back support, blah, 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 right? And so we've identified 2 things already. And once we know the diagnosis and the first aid, we can use that information to create a single or 2 complementary exercises. Example is if they are flexion intolerant low backs, like a disc might be, then maybe extension McKenzie protocol might work. Our diagnosis is lumbar spine disc. Herniation in this case, I usually say disc issues because it's not worth going into details with them. And then I say, what's creating this issue is maybe you're sitting too much. Maybe we get you in a standing desk a little bit more, or a bar top at your house because you're doing a lot of Zooms. And why don't we do a bird dog exercise, since that's a little bit more extension based and your body seems to like extension. And so kind of go through that. And then later on, I'll tend to hit, okay, here's how we're trying to build this thing up.
Nice, I like that. It sounds very familiar. Any other questions for anyone? I just have a kind of a send-off question or 2 for you guys if no one else can think of anything.
Yeah, I have a question. So coming out of school, I think a lot of times starting your own practice is something that can be pricey and can be potentially detriment for some students. And it might seem like an associate position might be a little bit more ideal, but in terms of a goal of how much money you should have, kind of guess, to start up your own practice to be a little bit sufficient for the first like few months, do you have any recommendations on like specific goals that you should have in terms of that?
It would be hard because also my mind is in past money. It's for money 12 years ago. So I couldn't tell you a solid number, but I can tell you one thing: don't go buy a new car or anything else new while you're in school. Like, I think it's I had classmates who like, they got a new car and a new Mac, and it's like, screw all that. Like you're in this little safety bubble right now. I think you were trying to get a new car. I'm like, I don't think you should do that. You still got that crummy car.
Yeah, my bumper's falling off.
So, but I think you can probably all reasonably find some type of room that doesn't cost a lot. $500, $600, $400. I don't even like, what is our friend in Reno, what does he pay, like $400 or something? I think it's like nothing, right? So I think you can get away with probably some pretty cheap things. I mean, and I had a side job. I waited tables for the first 6 months. I don't think there's any shame in doing that. It's just try not to solicit patients from your job, because who's going to go see a doctor who waits tables, So,
but Sarah actually does that pretty well doing that, to be honest.
She does it at the smoothie shop?
Yeah, her last patient was somebody she works with at the smoothie place.
Well, working with, but not customers.
Oh, I get what you're saying. Okay. Yeah.
So like, I wouldn't try to do your customers anyways, but I don't know. I don't, if you're living at home, stay at home. Like if you have roommates, keep them, get another, get a king bed and make your room a little bit more rentable. I don't think it's going to be easy for you. As an associate, it'll probably be a little easier, but if they don't practice like you might not be happy either. So you got to pick your poison.
That was a very general answer.
Is that I don't know a number. $2,000. What do you think you
It
need? What are your
depends.
spending habits? You know, Amr, what are your spending habits? What do you spend every day on food? You're a boy who looks like you get to lift.
Just like meal prep throughout the week, but I don't really try not to eat out that much.
Well, we're gonna
but-
cut all your protein intake. You don't get that anymore. Let's save some money. I mean, really, like who knows? So good question though, but I would save as much money as you can really. It's not going to be easy for anybody starting their own business.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Like 1,500 a month.
A 10 by
That's
10 room
some
in
bump
LA
beds.
is $1,500, someone said. I think you can call. So if you're looking for an advertised one, that might be what they're saying. Go to some chiro that probably looks like they got hammered by the COVID experience, and just ask them if you can rent a room. Like most people, like in my other office, I had 3 rooms that I wasn't using. I didn't advertise them anymore because I was too tired of people not calling. It was literally on every chiropractic classified site on your school. Nobody called. People all over the place have extra rooms, and you just got to ask them.
Nice. I guess just to kind of send it off, it'll be slightly different for each of you. So we'll start with Dawn. But over your past year being an associate at Performance Place, Dawn, like what is like one, I guess, clinical pro and one like business related pro that you've learned this past year since graduating to now that you wish you knew if you were like in our shoes now, something that would have helped you starting off?
Business pearl would be my marketing. It's uncomfortable. It gets you out of your comfort zone. I avoided it for a little bit at first, going out there, walking in places and trying to just tell them who you are. It's very uncomfortable, but the more you do it, the more confident you get at it. You're going to fail at first in doing stuff like that, but you have to do it. So just get past that uncomfortable part. My first time I walked into an office that like I couldn't market to them, but I wanted to practice on these 2 old ladies because they didn't look very intimidating to me. So I literally walked in and was like, hey ladies, can I practice my spiel on you for a second? Because I'm really nervous and my boss is making me do this. And it would just like being able to get the words out there with a big red face and maybe a little bit of tears made me feel better. So then the next place I went into, it wasn't as bad. And the more and more you do it, the better you get at it. There's no perfect way to do it either. Everybody, you're going to think one place it might have been successful and the next place that this person's not going to jive with what you're saying. So there's no perfect, just be you. Don't try to be something different that you think that they're going to want. Just walk in as you. And if it works, great. If not, so be it. That's my best business thing. Actually, let me add to that too, because Seb mentioned it earlier and I didn't get to say it. Whatever you think you should charge, double it. Seriously. If you're going to charge cash price of whatever it is, double that and then ask for that because you're worth it. I was really uncomfortable at first and didn't think I was good enough to ask for the prices that we have. And the first time I got paid it, I was like, this is insane. People actually pay me this. So you get more and more comfortable with that too. So definitely think about it. Clinical gem.
How to fix elbow pain.
Oh. We're not going to get into that.
Medial elbow pain dilemma.
I think a little clinical gem being, where do I want to start with that? I think the biggest thing that I'm really learning right now and noticing a huge improvement with is just the way that I talk to patients and ask them about their goals and stuff. So being here in what we do, I know I see what works for people, but everybody walking through your door isn't necessarily going to jive with that type of treatment. So the open-ended questions of what do you think is causing your issue and what do you think would work for you, give them a little bit of that, whether you agree or disagree, and then kind of ask them, are you open to a new perspective, and slowly start to put them into what you think is going to work best for them. Because I get a lot of people walking in thinking they're just going to be adjusted and send them on their way. And when they don't get that, they're upset and they don't come back. So if you can find that halfway ground and figure out how to word it a little bit differently for people and what their goals are, you're going to have better patient retention.
Yep. Good point.
That's a good point. For you, Seb, it's slightly different, but if you could go back in time to any point in time, what would be one business tip and one clinical tip you'd give your past self?
A business and clinical?
Yeah.
Business, I probably would have done more YouTube videos in the spurt of about 2005 to 2010. I think, oh, no, sorry, 15, like around the 13s, 15s, 16s or so on. It was much easier back then. Now, all of a sudden, we're giving you the tips to do YouTube videos and you're going to be our competition, but there was spurts in time where like one video a year, and we could have just crushed the entire, thing. So I think that would have been better because I had a lot of free time back then too. So, but yeah, clinical wise, it's, I was kind of hooked on the idea that that ART would help everything, that soft tissue would help everything, and it limited me for a very long time. Obviously, it has its time and place, but not until I finally realized that a low back extension protocol could help a low back that I've been doing tissue work on for a long time, and like just blew my damn mind. And then you got to wonder what else you're missing, but when you're kind of stuck in your bias about what you want to apply to the person's treatment and they're totally down with it, it's hard to get out of that circle. But thinking back to, people really like tissue work. So we could go either ways on this because I even thought the other day that we had a patient today. I don't know if I told you, like he discontinued care because he wanted tissue work. And I thought I had asked him, I said, hey, what do you want out of this appointment? He's like, well, I've done tissue work and blah, 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 and it hasn't worked. And I'm like, okay, so that means it. I guess I didn't really ask him what he wanted. He told me what he did, and I assumed that he didn't want that. But I could have easily done tissue work on him, and he would have come in, and I would have had bought myself more time to give him something that I thought might be a little bit more useful long term. But yeah, back in the day, I saw like 70 people a week. We're not doing that as much. I charged a little less, but it felt very uncomfortable how many people I was seeing because I only worked about 4 days and I was all by myself, basically no front desk person. So we see less than that now, but so it's kind of a tipping point of, do you want to be super busy or do you want to do what you think is right? So, but yeah, I think learning a little bit more of other tactics that could work would have been my first, I should have learned that a long time ago.
And just to kind of piggyback off that last part, what are like, I think most of us here have been exposed to it, but what are maybe like some of the top couple like clinical things you think people should like read up on or be comfortable with or be able to apply in their practice? You mentioned like protocols, things like that. So like
the McKinsey protocols are nice. They have a lot of books. And neurodynamics, obviously it could be a heavy read. McGill's work is really important. Chris protocols is a good, it's a good starting point for it. Kind of incorporates a lot of those things. And I guess we should list our typical first aids, the things that work and really wow people. Openers, neurodynamic openers. McKenzie, a lot of times press ups. Flexion, surprisingly, not like a end range loaded flexion, but just flexing somebody's spine. Our chin retractions work really good. Cervical extension works really good. Skin rolling works really good. Dermal traction, in case you don't know it, dermal traction is a really useful thing. What I missed?
I'd throw DNS in there. You didn't say that. That's not our first aid go-to, but I would say if you're not super familiar with that, maybe dive a little bit into it if you can. We do like bastardized versions of DNS in here though, but
we do a more strenuous I guess Amr, you went to DNS. Like, is our version, we just coach a lot more tension, I think, right?
Yeah, it's just slightly different in terms of that, but it's I'd say it's pretty aligned for the most part.
Yeah, we won't go to that as a first go because if you're in pain, who wants to load anything? So it's more of just like it's a natural progression to get there if we're not getting what we need to out of the other things.
Awesome. Well, we want to be respectful of your time. So thank you again for joining us, Dr. Sebastian, Dr. Dawne. We really appreciate all the tips and everything you've kind of mentioned to us.
Let me know when that recording stops, because I do want to talk to you about that thing.
Oh yeah, you could. We're good on the recording, Corey, and
Okay.
if anyone was curious about some of those